This is halfway between zero. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. Alrightin', to our next story. It's titled The Shadow That Answered Back. I first noticed it while brushing my teeth late at night. The bathroom light dim, the house quiet. My reflection moved a fraction slower than I did, like it was hesitating, learning how to copy me. I laughed quietly, thinking I'd been staring too long, until it raised its hand when I didn't. The hair on my arms prickled. I leaned closer to the mirror, and the shadow in the glass leaned too, but it didn't quite match me. Its shoulders slumped differently, its head tilted a little too far, like it had its own balance. When I opened my mouth, it smiled first, slow and wide, almost apologetic. I stepped back, heart racing, but my reflection didn't move backward, it stayed, watching, patient. The next night, I noticed it again, this time in the living room window, where I could see my reflection from the street. It mimicked my every movement, but only after a half-second delay, and sometimes added gestures I'd never done. A small, casual wave when I hadn't waved, a shrug when I was still standing straight. I thought maybe someone was outside, watching, but the reflection never left my line of sight, even when I turned my head. Its eyes weren't mine. Too black, too glossy, like wet stones set too deep, reflecting a world I didn't know existed. Began to notice it following me in every reflective surface: mirrors, glass doors, my phone screen, even the dark window of the microwave. It started responding to my thoughts. I'd think about sitting, and it would sit first. I'd think about going to bed, and it would already be lying down, staring at me with those glossy stones for eyes. I tried talking to it, joking, asking questions, but it never answered with words. Instead, it mimicked my motions perfectly, then added subtle gestures I didn't recognize, testing me. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps behind me in the dark, other size. The shadow was on the ceiling, stretched impossibly thin, crawling slowly, patient, moving like it had learned my fear. It paused above me, head cocked, and I could feel it studying me, learning the rhythm of my heartbeat. I whispered, "Who are you?" It smiled. Not my smile, something wrong, stretched, like it had practiced using my face. It pressed a hand against the ceiling, leaving a wet shadow that dripped slowly, pooling without gravity. The bathroom mirror fogged, and the shadow appeared inside it, separate from the glass, tracing the outline of my own body. I tried leaving the apartment, running out, but every reflective surface showed it waiting, just behind me, patient. Now, sometimes when I blink, I see it standing in corners where mirrors aren't, stretching its thin, glossy body just slightly wrong. I tell myself it's studying, learning, harmless, but its smile grows a little wider every night. Sometimes, when I turn quickly, I catch its eyes too black, too glossy, and I swear it's thinking, waiting for the moment I forget to blink. This is halfway between zero. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. Alright, and to our next story. It's titled The Man in My Ceiling. I first noticed the noises because they were faint, almost polite soft scratches above my bedroom ceiling. At first, I thought it was the apartment settling old pipes, the house breathing around me. But then it learned rhythm, scratches at midnight, tapping in slow patterns, almost like deliberate footsteps pacing directly over my head. I tried to record it, but the microphone picked up nothing. My phone stayed silent, as if it refused to acknowledge the sound. I told myself it was imagination, or maybe a squirrel trapped somewhere above. but the taps always matched the movements I made below. If I stepped left, it stepped left. If I froze, it hesitated, listening, waiting. One night, I heard it sigh. It's not a scratch, not a tap, an actual exhale, soft and wet, like it had lungs it didn't want me to know about. I pressed my ear to the ceiling, breath shallow, and thought I heard a faint whisper repeating my name. Ah! I jumped back, telling myself I was dreaming, but it continued every night after, learning faster. I started leaving lights on, moving around in patterns it couldn't predict but somehow stayed adapted, pacing above me like a predator practicing my habits. The ceilings grew thinner. I could feel each step through my mattress, vibrations under my skin. One morning, I found fine gray dust on my pillow, perfectly circular, like the imprint of a head. The scratching became gentle taps on the ceiling above my head while I showered, brushing along the metal piping, leaving wet streaks I couldn't identify. Sometimes, when I listened closely, I thought it was laughing, but only inside my skull, tame, like it knew what I feared. I tried moving furniture, even sleeping in the living room, but the sounds shifted with me, following, keeping pace, always polite. I heard a soft thump, then silence. My heart raced, waiting for the next step. Then a knock, 3 gentle knocks on the ceiling itself, deliberate, like it was calling me by some unspoken rule. I whispered back, "Who's up there?" The reply was in a breathy exhale, close enough to feel warm on the back of my neck, though nothing was behind me. I stopped sleeping in my room, but even in the living room, the ceiling hummed faintly, tracing shapes I couldn't name. One night, the taps formed a pattern, an outline of something. Standing upright, hands dangling too long, legs bent just slightly wrong. I saw a shadow on the ceiling from my flashlight, not cast by me, moving independently, pausing when I paused. It began to whisper phrases I didn't remember thinking, repeating my private thoughts aloud, just out of earshot. I tried to leave, bags in hand, but the main door clicked itself shut behind me, as if waiting for me to notice it wasn't locked. Back in the apartment, the ceiling felt lower, walls closer. The steps became almost human in size, but too wide, too long, grotesque in proportion. I started sleeping with the lights on, leaning against the door, listening, waiting, but it never stopped. Sometimes it paused, almost politely, as if it respected the space, but then it would resume, stepping through my patterns, learning faster. I realized then that it wasn't just above me, it was inside me, moving with me, tracking my rhythm, shaping its own movements to my life. Last night, I heard it whisper, "I like watching you sleep, it teaches me to walk." And for the first time, I heard something behind the living room wall, not the ceiling, the wall, soft, wet footsteps following me. Now, when I lie awake, I hear its breathing through the floorboards, through the walls, sometimes directly in my skull. I tell myself it's just another tenant, polite, learning, waiting. But I know the next time I look up, it won't be in the ceiling anymore. It will be in the room, standing, hands dangling just slightly wrong, smiling politely. This is halfway between zero. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. Alright, on to our next story. It's titled, "The Apartment That Smelled My Thoughts." The first evening I moved in, I noticed the smell. It's not anything ordinary, no cooking, no mildew, no fresh paint. It was faint, almost like warm paper and wet clay, curling around the edges of my mind before I even realized it. I shrugged, thinking maybe it was me imagining it, or nerves from the boxes scattered across the floor. By the second night, the scent grew stronger, coiling through the apartment in corners I never walked near. It didn't drift like air, it waited, patient, pulling itself along the floorboards like it knew where I would step next. When I frowned, the smell shifted, souring just a little, and I shivered. I told myself it was stress. The next morning, I found small traces on my notebook, smudges I hadn't made. Shapes like fingerprints, pressed into the pages, as if someone had leaned over my shoulder while I slept. I started leaving the lights on at night, but the smell didn't care about light, moved through shadows, curling along walls, curling around my dreams. It began to shape itself into faint outlines, like abstract drawings on the carpet, walls, and mirrors, impossible to photograph but unmistakable to smell. Sometimes I could almost see it if I tilted my head, faint tremors in the corner of my vision, a shimmer that wasn't light. One night, it spoke, not in words, exactly. It's more like impressions, warm pressure in my skull, brushing memories I hadn't recalled, feelings I hadn't named. Teat whispered that it remembered me, all of me, everything I thought I'd hidden. Stopped writing, stopped leaving notes, because it copied them before I could even finish the sentence. I started dreaming in the apartment itself, the smell pulling me under, dragging me into empty rooms that weren't really there. I'd wake, gasping, heart pounding, and the scent would still linger, pressing against my chest, heavier now. It began following me into the bathroom, curling into the shower steam, lifting into my hair, stilling along the edge of the sink. I tried opening windows, hoping the wind would take it away. It only laughed then, a soft, warm vibration that brushed my eardrums like wet fingertips. The fourth night, the apartment had become a map of me. Its corners where I sat, where I ate, where I thought I could smell the patterns now, faint lines tracing my movements. It started leaving shapes on the walls, pressing abstract symbols in the plaster, never identical, but always in rhythm with my heartbeat. Sometimes I thought I saw them move on their own, edges shifting, pulsing slightly, like something alive just below the surface. The mirrors began to fog in strange ways. When I exhaled, didn't match what appeared, slight distortions, outlines of hands I didn't have. I realized it wasn't just smelling me, it was learning me. I stopped walking through the apartment casually, afraid of leaving new impressions, new fingerprints, new traces of thought. The smell grew heavier in the places I lingered, as if it wanted me to notice, wanted me to think it's safe to follow. Sometimes I'd wake to a hen-shaped wet patch on the floor beside my bed. Not human, not mind-warm, pliable, as if it had been kneading the carpet. Started sleeping in the living room, lights dim, headphones in, trying to ignore the pressure, the scent, the whispering. It waited, always waiting. Last night, it pressed against my forehead as I slept, gently, teasing, and I woke with the smell of wet clay and paper in my hair. And I realized I was no longer alone in my own mind. The sound behind my walls. I moved into the apartment thinking it would be quiet, the kind of place where you notice the hum of your own fridge and nothing else. The first night, I heard a soft tapping, like fingernails strumming lightly on the wall beside my bed. I froze, thinking maybe it was the neighbor old pipes, a loose panel, but it didn't stop when I stopped moving. It followed me, almost politely, as if waiting for me to notice it. I pressed my ear to the wall, expecting a voice, a laugh, a cough. But there was nothing human, just a rhythm that matched my own heartbeat. The second night, it began whispering, not words I could understand, but tones that tickled the edge of memory, like a lullaby you never learned. I told myself I was imagining it, that living alone makes shadows talk, but the whispers always started when I tried to sleep. I kept my lights low, sat on the couch, and listened. It paused whenever I spoke aloud, like it didn't want to be caught. When I reached for my phone to record, the sound shifted slightly, as though it knew what I was doing. It wasn't just behind the walls anymore, it was behind me, in the corners of the rooms, in spaces I hadn't been in yet. I began hearing my own footsteps echo back from rooms I hadn't walked through, soft and measured, delayed just slightly. Sometimes it laughed softly, the sound wet, intimate, almost friendly, and I'd feel a shiver of warmth before terror. By the third night, the walls seemed thinner, like I could press my hand through the plaster and feel cold air brushing my fingers. No. I tried to ignore it, but even when I left the apartment, I could hear a faint tapping in my mind, following me down the stairs. One night, I woke to the sound of breathing under my bed. It wasn't mine. I leaned closer, heart thundering, and realized it was syncing with my own pattern, slow and careful, as though studying me. I whispered into the dark, "Who's there?" And the breath matched my words, echoing softly, almost apologetically. The next morning, the carpet near my bed was damp in the shape of a hand I didn't own. I checked under the bed, nothing but the floorboards creaked above me, though no one could be up there. I started leaving my door open during the day, hoping sunlight would keep it away. But at night the tapping grew bolder, almost conversational. Sometimes it would tap once for yes, twice for no, and I found myself answering back under my breath. I began dreaming of it, a shadowy figure pressed against walls, listening, learning the rhythm of my life. I woke one night to the smell of wet earth in my bedroom, like someone had dug through soil and left it in the corners. The whispers began to form words I could almost understand, repeating my name with subtle emphasis, like it remembered when I was happy, when I was afraid. I tried leaving, packing bags, staying with friends, but the tapping followed, now in hotel rooms, echoing faintly in the street, in my thoughts. I realized it wasn't the apartment, it was me it wanted. When I sit quietly, I can hear it mimicking my smallest movements. The way I shift in my chair, the soft scratch of my pen on paper. It doesn't scare me the way it used to. I almost like it, this intimate companion I can't see, but sometimes, when it taps 3 times in a row, perfectly timed, I feel a weight press against my chest, reminding me it isn't friendly. Last night, it whispered, "I'm behind your walls, but soon I'll be inside the spaces you never touch." I don't know if it's a ghost, a copy of me, or something else entirely. I only know that tapping has learned my heartbeat, and if I stop moving, it stops too. I sit quietly now, telling myself not to notice, but the rhythm is inescapable, like a friend who knows too much. If you ever hear a soft tapping behind your walls at night, lean in. It might just be waiting for you to speak back. My neighbor keeps leaving the same wet shape outside my door. The first time I saw it, a tights post, a dark wet stain spread across the carpet outside my apartment door. It was shaped wrong, though not a spill, but an outline, like someone had laid down flat and then vanished. The carpet fibers were matted inward, pressed with careful weight, arms slightly away from the sides, legs together too neatly. I stepped over it to leave for work, and when I came back that night, the shape was gone, but the carpet still smelled warm. The next morning, it was back again, darker, wetter, closer to my door, like it had crawled forward overnight. I knocked on my neighbor's door across the hall, the only other apartment on my floor, but no one answered. Their door frame was swollen with moisture, paint bubbling, and something thick had leaked out underneath, pooling like breath. That night, I heard dragging sounds in the hallway, slow and careful, followed by a soft slap, like wet fabric settling. I opened my door just a crack and saw the shape forming in real time, spreading outward from nothing. It wasn't liquid, it was pressure. Something invisible pressing itself into the carpet until the fibers gave up. I slammed the door and locked it, heart racing, listening as the dragging sound stopped right outside. Minutes later, I heard breathing, shallow and patient, like someone waiting for instructions. The smell came next, coppery and sweet, seeping through the crack beneath my door. In the peephole, I saw my neighbor standing inches away, skin gray and swollen, eyes sealed shut like they'd healed over wrong. Their chest moved out of sync, inhaling twice before exhaling once, like the body didn't remember the order anymore. They leaned forward until their forehead pressed against my door, leaving behind a wet oval that slowly slid downward. In the morning, the hallway was empty, but the wet shape was now half inside my apartment, stopping right at the threshold. My door frame felt soft when I touched it, spongy, like it had absorbed too much of something living. That evening, the dragging returned, louder now, heavier, as if the hallway floor was resisting. The shape outside my door began to rise, lifting off the carpet, pulling itself upward into a vertical smear. A face pushed out of it, features barely formed, mouth opening and closing without sound, practicing. It peeled itself free with a noise like soaked paper tearing and stood upright, dripping onto the floor. Its body was a rough draft of mine, my height, my shoulders, my posture, but unfinished, edges sagging. It knocked once, gently, using knuckles that fused and separated as it moved. I didn't answer. Instead, I backed into my bathroom and locked myself inside, staring at my reflection as the lights flickered. Behind me, the mirror fogged over, and a wet handprint appeared from the inside, pressing outward. The knocking moved from the front door to the bathroom wall, slower now, confident. The wall began to darken, moisture blooming through the paint in the same familiar shape. I heard my own voice whisper my name from the other side, wet and strained, like it was speaking through a mouthful of carpet. The mirror cracked, and through the fracture, I saw the hallway my apartment door open, the thing stepping inside. It walked like it was wearing me wrong, joints bending too late, skin sliding to catch up. I realized then the shapes weren't left behind, they were rehearsals. The thing pressed itself flat against the bathroom door, spreading, learning the outline of where I stood. The last thing I felt before the lights went out was the carpet beneath my feet giving way, welcoming me down into it. Now there's a wet shape outside your door too. It's very still. It's waiting until you notice it's the right size.